All right, we're going to start off today with Lizzie
What's
Enders.
up? What's up?
Lizzie Enders, what we got going on today? This
So we
truth, lie, or
have a little bit of
shenanigans?
it's truth, but there's a lot of shenanigans, and I think there's a lot of confusion about this topic. So we're going to be going to Charlotte, North Carolina, talking about a young man, a 14-year-old high school student in the ninth grade, and he's at a predominantly white. Or he was attending a predominantly white private school. And so, as part of the English curriculum for his ninth grade class, they were going to read the August Wilson play, Fences. And so I'm not sure if people are familiar with reading plays in English class, but it's a little bit different. The format's a little bit different than reading an actual book. Usually for plays and scripts, you read the actual text out loud in the class. And so this young man, his name is Jamel, his mother, Faith Fox, took exception to the fact that at this predominantly white school, where he is one of a few Black students or persons of color in his class, that they would not only be reading Fences, but that um, they would be reading it aloud to the class. And so his mom said in an interview that she imagined her son's mostly white class at the Providence Day School reading the dialogue out loud. She said her main concern was that the themes were too mature for the group and will foster stereotypes about Black families, and would single her son out with a bunch of white students saying the N word. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the play Fences, again, it's written by African American playwright August Wilson. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning play. Different iterations of the play. When I saw the play back in the 80s, I saw it with Darth Vader. You guys know who Darth Vader is?
Yeah,
I
nice.
saw it. But the most recent version of the play, I also saw it in New York City, where Denzel Washington was playing the lead character Troy, and that in turn went into a movie version as well. And so, my question to the panel, first and foremost, do you buy into this mother's argument that this particular play or any type of literature that uses racial slurs, uses racial epithets, should be off limits, should not be taught in schools, particularly in predominantly white schools where the African American population is few and far between, or the person of color population is few and far between, to protect the minority student? Who wants to go first?
um, I was going to jump in, but let's start with Robbie Rock.
God, I knew you were going to do this to me again.
We love you,
Take
Robbie
the
Rock.
take the guy who has no real contextual experience in this and
Sure
see
you do. Sure
where
you do.
well, no, because that's what I mean. At pre-show, we were discussing other works of literature that use racial epitaphs. I know that when I was studying up on the story, one of the stipulations that the school had put forward was that they were going to replace any racial slurs in the play with N-word. And you know that that just drives me absolutely nuts. Just that supplantation of N-word for racial epitaphs. It's equivalent in my eyes. And in the context, it's absolutely the equivalent. I can absolutely buy into what the mother is saying. If this poor young man if his peers are predominantly white in the classroom, as they're reading this and as they're reinforcing stereotypes that would have been present in the 50s, that they would project this on the kid, or it might be used to mock or derive this poor kid. I understand that there's an importance in retaining the literature and the culture, but not having read Fences, I really don't know how charged it is. But yeah, I'm definitely on board with the mom's reasoning.
I
Okay.
just want to point out on TikTok, we have a shout out for Casual Liberals. Casual Liberals says, "Hey, you guys are awesome." All right, Gianni
Yeah,
Storm,
thanks.
what are your thoughts?
Even before we get to Gianni, let me just, Mike Wolf pointed out, because I didn't name the actual actor who played Troy in the Broadway version. No, it's not Hayden Christensen. It's James Earl Jones. So yes. So we can get like some context for the actual play and the characters involved in that. Johnny?
Yeah, so from that story, the 2 points that I really took from this were from the mother. I like that she addressed, instead of addressing the issue, they're making it seem like I'm an angry black woman. I kind of been hearing that narrative a lot. I'm not saying that that's not what's happening, but it just seems like when I first read the story, it just seemed like, okay, is she just attacking for no reason? But as you get deeper, you realize that she's making a point. Like, why are we still reading these type of books? I mean, I'm sure like these kids are what, 14? They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram. So they've heard these words, they've heard these things before. We don't need to kind of bring it up again. I understand what she's saying. So and then it also shed light to the son when he mentioned that he now understands what Black Lives Matter means when they're saying things like about George Floyd and all of the people in the streets dying and stuff like that. It's not just about the extremeness of it. It's also about like in the schools and in discrimination still happening. So um, I just feel like I'm with her. I understand what she's talking about, and I do agree that certain books like that shouldn't be in school. Why are we
Interesting.
reading it? What's the point?
Interesting. Okay. So I have a lot to say on this actually. So in that article, the New York Times article, it said the reason the enrollment was terminated was because of bullying, harassment, and racially discriminatory attacks, including multiple personal attacks against a person of color in the administration, to which the mother denied it. So the mother was apparently making these attacks, and that was the reason the enrollment was pulled. Um, Now, she denied it, saying that they are trying to make her seem, like Yanni was saying, an angry, ranting black woman. Um, Now, based upon her argument, right? So I'm inclined to believe that this woman, Faith Fox, fits the stereotype. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's based solely on the
Oh
whole
no. Fits
uh,
what stereotype?
of the angry, ranting black woman stereotype,
Woo!
right?
You talking?
Let me explain. But let me explain. I'm saying it based solely on the whole basis of her argument in the first place. How in the hell is she? How the hell is reading the play Fences inherently racist? Right? She said that the problem was that the students that she imagined the white students reading the dialogue aloud with all the N words and other racial epithets, and that's why it was wrong to her. Is because she was imagining what it was like for a white student to read it. But how in the world can anyone, black, white, Asian, Latino, learn and understand the concepts provided in the play without reading it? Matter of fact, I was thrilled they were reading the play. You know, how many times in the past decades have we complained about books like this being banned, like Robbie was talking about, or there's no historical context or relevant works about black people? Um, and if I'm being honest, and this is why I made my earlier statement, if you were to reread her comment, right, reread her comments, and you were instead told that this was a white woman speaking, everyone would be talking about she is a Karen because a lot of her comments were straight uh, Karen like. If she were a white woman, it would have been a totally different reaction. So those are my
Do
thoughts.
you
But
think that she could have? I understand the reading of African American literature and stuff like that, but why a all white predominantly school that? Not that they don't need to know about Black culture and history, but it just doesn't make sense, and it's like doesn't make sense.
I mean, I personally think that to 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 go forward, to go forward as because we struggle with trying to. We believe that everyone's equal, right? We we believe
Who,
that. Well,
who,
us right here,
oh,
this
us
group right
four.
here.
Us four.
we, we believe we believe everyone is equal, but but that's not the case for everybody. So how do you get them to also see things that way? And you can't do it without looking at history, looking at where we were, where we came from, without understanding. Even Rob B, for example, has been on this show, and he said several times that he's learned a lot just from being a part of this group that he didn't understand. There was nuances to the struggles that he didn't understand simply because he wasn't aware, right? Because he hadn't
Very
experienced those. So if you're not put in a position to experience them, to understand them, to read about them, to learn about them, then you never move forward. You never get better.
And just nail there's the difference between knowing of it and understanding it. Because
Right.
definitely aware of these things, but to understand it with any depth, this has been a safe haven, and I've learned tremendously from my co-hosts and the audience.
Now, what are your thoughts, Lizzie?
So obviously, as an educator, as a Black woman, as someone who has read fences, have
Are
it
you a
here,
black woman?
taught fences, read fences. No, I don't identify as white like some of our other co-hosts, neo-nicks. I am
Like
a
Rob
Black
B?
woman. Rob B said earlier he hasn't even identified as white on this show. That would be you, brother. You.
I have
Um,
not identified as white.
but no, so please note, as an educator, as a Black woman, as someone who has taught fences, as someone who has read fences, who has seen it on Broadway, who has seen the movie, I question the legitimacy of her argument,
Yeah.
especially when one you consider that the teacher in question is Black. So we're talking about a Black teacher teaching in a predominantly white school, making a
I
point
actually
of
didn't know the
teaching
teacher was black.
Uh-huh.
making a point of teaching a text by a Black author. Okay. But also, we can't have it both ways. We can't, look at the country as a whole and say that our history, our culture, our literature is not being taught. And then when it is taught,
Right.
we pick and choose
Yeah.
which version of it is taught.
So
We
we're in
pick and
agreement.
choose
Yep.
that we only want the clean up version that is taught. So if we are going to say that we can't teach because this is a predominantly white school, we can't teach fences because it includes inflammatory language. And it's not just the language. I mean, there are a lot of adult themes in fences, but it's not for naught. It's for a purpose. This is a coming of age story about a Black family, a Black man in the 50s. But if we're not going to teach fences, do we not teach the narrative of Frederick Douglass,
Mm.
Mhm.
which the N word is used throughout that? Do we not teach Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs? Do we
Yeah.
not show the movie
Preach.
Glory?
Yep.
Do we not teach roots? Like, where does it end?
Yep.
And in the pre-show, Rob B and I were having a discussion, and we were talking about other books that do not focus on Black families, that aren't from Black authors, that have been banned in the United States. Huckleberry Finn being one of them. To Kill a Mockingbird being one of them. Like, these are books that have been banned in the United States, in libraries, in classrooms, because they include the N word. So at what point do we say, okay, we are going to accept this racist past, but we teach it in a certain context that is a teachable moment,
Mm-hmm.
that is educational for our students?
Mm-hmm.
I think I've spoken about this topic before, in that my best friend's mom, my other best friend's mom, is one of the Little Rock Nine, Carlotta Walls Lanier. So she wrote a book about her experience being a member of the Little Rock Nine. Little Rock Nine in the 50s, they were in Little Rock, Arkansas, trying to go to school. And the people in Little Rock were not having it. So they were desegregating the public school system in Little Rock, Arkansas. And in this book, it's a phenomenal book, read it. In this book, she talks about how that first year in school, she was called the N-word almost every single day. She was spit on, she was pushed, she was yelled at, attacked. Do we not teach this? Because it could be offensive to
Offensive.
certain people.
Mm-hmm.
Do we not teach this because we think white students might have a comical, comedic reaction? And if that's what this mother is saying, I would question, why do you even have your kid in this school to begin with?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
If you feel that the student body is not embracing your child as a young Black man and that he's going to be singled out, why is he in this school to begin with?
Yeah.
But in addition to that, the thing that upset
I mean,
me the most about
there's a education piece. I mean, it is sometimes hard for Black students to get into some of these elite private schools, to get the same level of education that these that white students are receiving. So
and I agree with that, but in the same vein, like if you are concerned about how a book is being presented in his class, how is he receiving a fair education if you are concerned about how the other students are going to react to that? And the thing that upset me the most about this topic was that this young man was expelled. Now,
but
we're
it
dealing with
wasn't
semantics here
semantics. Yeah. Okay.
because the school says he was unenrolled,
Yeah.
which is like, Jada Pinkett talking about entanglements and versus saying she had an affair. He was expelled. He was expelled from school, not for something that he did, but because of what Neo talked about earlier, his mother's actions, because this whole argument ensued and it became a big kerfuffle, a big brouhaha. She made comments in allegedly, I'm a journalist, so I have to use allegedly. She allegedly made comments in a Facebook post where she was attacking the Black teacher and called her a disgrace to the Black race. And so it just became so inflammatory that this young man was caught in the middle. And he talked about how he thought he was going to be a lifer at this school. This is the only school he's ever attended. He never, anticipated that he was going to be unenrolled over an argument about a book in which he said nothing. These were the adults behaving badly. So I'm mad at the mama
Yeah.
and I'm mad at the school.
I'm disappointed in Mama. Yeah, I kind of agree with your school. I mean, they should work out something for the child. I mean, for the sake of the child, the school should work out something, understanding that the mother is the problem. Because I had a problem Mama too, so I'd be really disappointed if I got kicked out of school because of my problem Mama.
And that's not to say that her concerns aren't real. But I think if you think about the full context of it, as a teacher, then what am I allowed to teach?
Yeah.
Like, what am I allowed to teach?
So there's a great comment from Robin Johnson. From what I
Robin.
read, the parent was concerned for how isolated the child was feeling from these readings. On one hand, the whole experience needs to be discussed, right? The other hand is if these kids would isolate the children of color in the classroom, then another reading should be chosen. So, I mean, she's making a good
And
point
so,
that
but
maybe
if you
Fences isn't the best reading for that class.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but then do you not teach the narrative of Frederick Douglass? Like
What
what am I
doesn't
what
involve?
and I'm not really teaching. I don't teach based on what I think my white students, and I have yet to have a white student in my Howard classes. I have white students over the summer with the School of the New York Times, but I'm not basing my curriculum on what I think my white students might react to. And again, if that's the case, then is this really a safe environment for the student to begin with?
So, another comment from Candace Winston. She says there's a quote. Miss Fox sent an email where the school said Miss Fox sent an email to the school's director of equity and inclusion calling her a disgrace to the Black community. So that's why I'm speaking to the type of person we may be dealing with. Um, that we're dealing with an angry person, not necessarily an angry Black woman or anything, but just it
I
generally
don't even,
sounds like an angry
He's a lawyer
person.
too.
and I don't want to call her angry. I understand as a mother, you want to protect your child,
Sure. She
especially
seemed
in an
pretty angry to
environment
me.
where he's the minority. However, but I don't want to use angry because I don't want that negative connotation
Fair
or
enough.
that negative trope about, angry Black women. But in the same vein, I'm just like, okay, what do you want me to teach? I teach again at Howard. This past semester, we read several pieces of literature, several, text articles, essays that use the N word. Again, these are predominantly Black students. But would I refrain from introducing a classroom of white students from the? Absolutely
Why not?
not.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Absolutely.
I mean,
This is our history.
and
This
again,
is
there's a level of equality we need to speak on. I mean, so Kevin Thaxton says, I think Uncle Tom's Cabin isn't bad. Uncle Tom wasn't a snitch; he just wasn't militant. There's a history behind Uncle Tom's Cabin. Yeah,
well.
because
First of all,
it was taken and it was the narrative was manipulated. The public narrative of what the story was about was very different than what it's actually about. But go ahead,
but
first of
also
all.
too. First of all, the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, Harriet Beecher Stowe, she was no friend to other female Black writers, particularly Harriet Jacobs, who wrote Incident in the Life of the Slave Girl back at that time. So I kind of get a little triggered when I hear people talk about Uncle Tom's Cabin. My issue with Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it's a great novel, it's a great book, but people took that book and used that as a negative moniker towards Black people, Black men in particular, not realizing that there's a difference between Uncle Tom's Cabin and the real Uncle Tom,
What an
who
Uncle
was a
Tom
young man
is.
named Josiah Henson, who was not an Uncle Tom
No, he wasn't. Yeah.
at all.
Last comment. So Latoya Blakely says we must confront it if we want to be better. So
Yeah.
totally agree. All right, let's move on to our next hot topic. Great discussion, everyone. Great discussion. Great comments online as well.
Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right, next up